Hello and welcome on back, everybody. We have gathered here today to not hear lore about Pro Lord and Akeada and all that's in between. No. Today we are here for the story itself. Yes, it is time to tell the story. Now, let's go ahead and begin. Now, the story is taking place on Prothor, deep within the crust of Prothor. We'll be following a root clan. And the person we'll be following is Akeada. I'll be telling the story in the perspective of Akeada the best I can. Because that's the only way I really know how to do it, because that's kind of what I did when I was younger. I role played all of it. I was a lone LARPer, but that's enough about me. Let's get to it. So, we will be taking place at the very beginning of his story. Now, let's go ahead and begin. So, Akeada becomes conscious inside the pod. And when he starts coming to, he starts reaching out. But as he's reaching out, he feels other roots and stuff within the pod itself. And he's starting to get tangled up as he tries to dig his way out to the wall of the pod. His hand finally reaches the wall, and the tip of his fingers pierce the pod's lining. And then it bursts out, and he starts flowing out with all of the fluid that's in the pod. The vines catch him before he hits the ground. The vines are embedded in his. They're embedded in him, in his arms, his chest, his neck, his back, his legs, all over. And even his tail. So, he's struggling to break free of the vines. He manages to break his right arm free. He reaches to his left arm. He starts ripping out the other roots, vines, whatever, tendrils that are attached to him. He manages to get his left arm free. He starts breaking the rest on his body, and when he finally breaks the last holding up his legs and his back, he falls to the ground. His tail is still attached to the pod, and him thinking it's just another vine, he grabs somewhere at the base, more down the line, like the mid-tail, with both hands, and, well, not really both hands, but reaches around, grabs it with his right hand, and then rips. And half of his tail gets broken off with it. And that is his first instance of feeling true pain. All of this hurt to begin with because they're embedded in his skin. He's ripping them out, they're breaking off, they're still attached to him. So he still has some vines attached to him, just dragging on the ground now. But the spot that his tail was starts burning. He didn't really know this feeling, except it's all new. So it starts burning really hot. And he starts rolling around on the ground in pain. And then he finally just falls unconscious due to all the pain that he just now suffered. He comes to hearing a voice in his head. And the voice was another word. Well, we don't know, but we know, but he doesn't know. It was a worker. I guess a satch. A satch, amazed that there is a new birth. The satch approaches, puts his hand on Akeada. Akeada is struggling to come to his feet. The worker realizes that it is a Vancer and not a satch. So he immediately runs out of the room, well, runs out of the portion of the cave, and straight to the queen. Now, as Akeada is struggling to get on his feet, a new sensation comes about. And that is his first, I guess, sight. And as we all know, his sight is pretty much pulses. Every few seconds or so, he sends out a new pulse, and it's like starting to visualize a map in his head. He starts to see, it starts to become clearer and clearer as he adjusts to this new sensation. And it's putting like a 3D map of the room in his head. So he can see all the little pebbles that are on the ground, the pod that was behind him, and all the tendrils that were in the pod, and the pod's just leaking, dripping, as it slowly starts to wither. So he turns it on to himself, and he starts looking at himself. And he realizes that he has a tail. The thing he thought was another angel was a part of him. So he struggles, he works his way, he crawls to the wall of the cave to help stand up. He finally gets to his feet, and right as he starts walking towards the entrance of the cave, he gets a pounding his head and falls back to his knees, grabbing his head, and the voice emerges from this pounding is the queen. The queen is beckoning Akeada to come to her side, so she may see, inspect, and give orders to her new warrior. So she beckons him to come to her immediately. Akeada finds his way back to his feet again, holding onto the wall, slowly slogging his way, dragging his tail on the ground to the entrance of the cave. To the entrance of that portion of the cave. And there's a long hallway with some twists and turns that he can somewhat see. It's fading the further away he gets from him. So he can't see all the way down the tunnel. So he just starts dragging his hands across the wall as he walks. Slowly stepping, still learning how to move properly. As he goes, he starts clenching his hands together, moving his arm. Well, moving his hand for his wrist. Then he starts moving his elbow to his shoulder. He starts letting go of the wall. Rotates his neck, just getting a feel for pretty much everything. He still can't quite move his tail just yet. He doesn't have a hang of that. But he's able to clench his feet, or clench his hands, clench his feet, like curl his toes. And he starts walking down the hall without the support of the wall. With just a few minutes of being born, he now has almost a full grasp of how to move. So, he continued walking down the hall. And when he gets to the end, he's greeted with a big room full of other creatures. Without thinking, he immediately gets into a posture with his hands out like he has claws. He doesn't really have claws, but that's just the first thing he did. And then he realizes that it's just his workers. Well, not his workers, but then he sensed the queen and then relaxed. The pounding in his head, it's kind of more of a roar now, speaks to him, and he's compelled to do what this voice tells him to do. Sorry, I'm taking a drink. And the queen is inspecting him, and she says, my Vancer. You were born premature. So don't expect too much. But I command you to find a way out. So, Akita bows his head and starts skating, walking around the room to find another entrance, but he finds nothing. So he goes back out the way he came and goes a little bit farther down of the hallway. Clarify, when he came out of the room of the pod, he went right. So instead of, now the pod's going to be on his left. So instead of going to his left to the pod room, he goes straight a little bit. The hallway ends in a dead end. So he goes back to the queen, tell her. It's his first words. It's kind of just muttered because he doesn't quite know how to speak just yet. But he just says there's no way. The queen sighs and says, then make a way. He asks, how? Because as he's going, he's learning the language from everybody else because all their minds are linked. So as he's starting to get a grasp of that, slowly, not much, so his sentences are going to be real short. He just asks, how? She just tells him, do you figure it out? Akita bows his head, turns back, and goes down the hallway. He goes back into the pod room, looks around, and finds the pod withered away. There are no more pods. That was the last pod. There is nothing else in this room but the dead pod. So he leaves the room, turns left and looks down the dead end. He approaches the wall, puts his hand on it, and slightly punches his hand through the rock. He takes his hand out, looks at his hand, curls it into a fist, pulls back because he's compelled to get out by any means now, since the queen has ordered him to make a way. So he pulls back, throws a punch against the wall, breaks his knuckles. So he falls to his knees in pain now that he broke his hand. As he's pulsing, he sees steam starting to arise from the open wound. From his hand, he feels that burning sensation as he felt before. But it only lasts for a few seconds. The pain subsides, and he looks back up to the wall, and there's a small crack. He stands up, starts digging in it with his hands, and manages to pull a rock off, or like a little piece off. So he now knows what he has to do. He gets back to his feet, puts his right foot back with his left forward, pulls back, and throws another punch, breaking his hand, but he threw it a little bit harder this time. Put more power behind it. It breaks his hand even more. So he keeps repeating this. He punches it once, starts digging, punches it once and starts digging, breaking his hands repeatedly. He's alternating between his right and left. So instead of just punching it once now, he's punching it twice and then digging with both as his knuckles heal. He's able to move his hands a little bit, and well, they're broken, but that's about it. So Varada sees at this for hours. The queen sends a worker to Akeada to see if he finds anything. The worker approaches Akeada. It asks, what are you doing? Akeada turns with his hands smoking. The worker notices this, but it doesn't say anything. Akeada says, I am trying to break us out of here. The worker says, good, I will go let the queen know. He leaves. Akeada goes back to punching the wall. He comes back just a few minutes later. It says the queen demands you to hurry. Our resources are running low down here. Well, running out of water. Because there's only a small drinking pool in there. They don't really need food, it's just the water that they're now running short on. So, Akeada is now compelled to push even harder. So, he puts even more power behind his strikes, and instead of just his hand braking, it snaps his arm. But he starts working after the worker leaves and giving him the message. So he then falls to his knees again, holding his arm as it resets itself, snaps back in place, or I guess just resets itself, and starts healing again. He gets up to go dig, but as he went to dig, he feels like something wrapping around him, and he can't quite go in to dig. So he's like frozen there. He starts getting frustrated, and it just throws another punch with his left hand, breaking his arm and hand again. Now, for us, just off topic, well, not off topic, but on topic, the sensation that I just talked about of him feeling like something was wrapped around him, I like to call a tempest chain. That is the power of the queen compelling all to do her bidding. So when you hear me say that, like something is wrapping around him, that's not like a monster or anything like that. That's what it is. It's compelling him to do what she asks, no matter what. So, his left arm breaks, it falls. He went to grab it, but he can't quite do that either. So as it hangs there, he pulls his right arm back and throws it against the wall. That snaps as well, but by the time that happens, his left hand is good to go. So he's sitting there doing this repeatedly, but he's fighting through the pain that he is now having to suffer. But now both of his arms are broken. He pulls back and starts kicking the wall, but he kicks hard enough to break his foot. And he falls to his knee, but he gets back up and goes back at it. So now he's punching and kicking the wall, breaking his hands, arms, knees, shins, just breaking his limbs repeatedly as they regenerate. But as he goes, he starts to notice that he's able to do it more, he starts to realize he's throwing, what's the word I'm looking for? He's starting to go harder without breaking his hands and arm. So he's compelled to push even harder now that his body is starting to adjust, because every time he breaks his limbs, they grow back stronger and stronger and stronger. So he keeps doing this. The worker comes back to now find rubble throughout the entire tunnel of small rocks. It's everywhere. He approaches Akeada that has now dug somewhat of a hole. He asks the progress, and it says, I managed to break portions of the wall off to dig a hole. He says, good. But the queen demands more progress. Akeada bows his head and says, as she wishes. So, when the worker leaves, Akeada lifts his head up, turns to the wall, clenches his fist even tighter, and his hand starts burning just from him clenching his fist. Pulls back and throws the strongest punch that he has so far. It snaps his arm in half, breaking his hands and fingers. But it doesn't just break it, like, buckles. Like, what's a good example? I'm trying to think. Mm, I guess if you smush something and it starts popping out the sides, but all of this is just branches, he's roots and stuff. So he snaps, but he managed to hit it so hard that all of it snapped at once, and his arm actually fell off. So he falls to his knees holding his arm, and as he's going, well, as he's kneeling there, vines burst out from where his severed arm was. But it's like right above his elbow, like where his forearm is. So that's just where it went off. So vines burst out. He falls back a little bit, startled that there are now vines bursting out of his severed spine. He notices that vines burst out from his severed arm as well. They wrap around each other and reattach. As he's sitting there, he's able to move his hand like normal again. Stands back up, looking at his hand there for a minute, and just gets right back to work because he's compelled to just push on and push forward. That was the only instance of this happening. He pulled back his power just a little bit so it doesn't happen, but it nearly happens over and over again where it's only hanging on from a mere shred, so it's taking longer to heal than it was before, but he's making more progress. So he's slightly pleased by this. So he just carries on like this, over and over and over. So in our time, weeks have gone by of him doing this, and rocks are starting to fuse to his skin to reinforce, because his body is trying to adapt the best it can. So it's grabbing rocks and just attaching it to his arms. So now he has rocks on his knuckles, his fingers, or his pretty much like stone claws. So he's able to scratch and pull out bigger pieces than he was able to before, up to his elbow, into his shoulder. But the rock's starting to fade, and for his legs, it's pretty much the same thing. His toes, kind of like claws, up to his knees, and slightly on his hips. His chest is slightly bare with his face. His face started to get harder plating because of all the rocks flying, smacking him in the face. Same as his chest. It got a little bit sharper, but that's about it. His main tools are going to be his hands and his feet. Now he can move his toes like his hands, so he can pick up stuff and throw it. So as he's breaking, pieces are falling off, he's grabbing them with his feet and throwing them back. He's able to move his tail now, but his tail can't really do much against the wall. But his tail's been getting smashed from all the rocks that he's been throwing back as well. So just the tip of the tail kind of has stone attached to it now. But as he goes through, keeps pushing and pushing, breaking his arms and legs, he finally manages to punch through the wall. His whole entire arm just goes right into it. He grabs the wall and pulls back. It just starts breaking pieces off. He manages to bust into another portion of a cave. The worker approaches as he bursts through and pulls through a little bit. He puts his head up to the hole so he can send a pulse through. And what he can't really see too much in there. But what he can see is a large portion of water just straight ahead of him. Well, he pulls his head back and starts digging out the rest of the wall. He steps through the small, not really a small wall. He steps through the hole in the wall that he made. He starts scanning the room for anything. As he's walking around, he steps into it was straight. He steps into it and it starts rippling out. So he successfully found the water. It looked different than what he saw the other stones were. It was fuzzier. His pulses weren't really able to go through it as well as the snow. But as he stands in the water, he starts allocating into it more, so he's able to distinguish this from something else. So he starts walking around the room more, walking into the puddle. He finds kind of like a pour, like it's just not really pouring, it's trickling out of a good portion of the wall. He puts his hand on the wall where it's trickling down, and it starts going over his hand. He pulls back, looks at his hand, and starts rubbing his fingers together. And now it feels good that he found water for the rest of his people. He finishes scanning the area. There's another tunnel leading to another portion of a cave. And he goes through that tunnel to make sure there's no threats or anything like that in there. But it leads to another small room and another dead end. He goes back out into the water area. It's like a small, not small, it's like a big lake under the water. It's not deep, terribly deep, but it's the whole room is kind of just water. So he walks around. He can't really see the roof of the place. It's really high up and it's out of his reach. But he starts approaching the hole in the wall he made. He starts approaching the hole made in the wall. And the worker steps through the hole in the wall. And the worker says, "Okay, you've done it," in an excited way. He nods and says, "Yes, inform the queen that we now have a drinking supply." But as he's talking, he feels a pressure change in the room. He doesn't quite know what that is, but he turns and starts walking towards this person that he felt. The worker asks, "What's wrong?" And he just said he's not sure. He steps into the water, just trying to look around, just not understanding what this new sensation is. And as he stands there, he feels something big drop from the roof where he can't quite see. As it's dropping down, he jumps back and it lands in the water. He stands there scanning it more, and he's starting to make out what it is. He sees a big body and 4 limbs on each side, with 2 smaller ones in the front and the medium ones next to it. He's not quite sure what to make of this, but as he's thinking, he feels sharp pain go through his chest. And it's lifting him up off of his feet. He tells the worker to leave. Now, the worker panics, rushes back through the hole in the wall. The now new thing that just appeared through Akeada. He slams into the wall and falls down to his knees. He sends pulses out to keep an eye or to find out what's going on. The creature is now rushing towards the hole in the wall he made. It slams its body against the hole, trying to dig a way through, but it can't quite reach. So Akeada, without really thinking, gets to his feet and starts running to the creature. He jumps on its back and starts slashing at it with his claws. It threw Akeada off just by shaking a little bit. He fell to the ground, got back up, and the creature turned to him. He can now get a full view of what he's looking at and what impaled him. And that creature is the vine spider. Well, I guess in this case it'd be a root spider. As he stares at it, and it stares back at him, waiting for each other to make their next move. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and stop it there. And not tomorrow, but next time, we will continue on with the fight of Akeada and the new root spider. So everybody, hope you enjoyed today's story portion. We are in the cave, and we'll have... I don't want to spoil it too much, I don't want to go into too much detail. So this is the first part of the cave. Prothwart Cave. Hope you guys enjoyed. Now I'll see you all next time. I'm not gonna talk about what I'm gonna do is talk about each portion. Like when I'm done, I'll talk about the portions of the cave because there's not gonna be too much to talk about if I just talk about it next. So I'm gonna tell the story up to a certain point, and then I will go back and talk about some of the things that did happen. So for now, I will leave you guys at that cliffhanger. Stay awesome, everybody. See you next time.